Welcome to the fourth Public Participation and Deliberative Democracy Festival. This is the last session of the day. And before giving the floor to Andrea, that is the session organizer of this very interesting conversation, I would like to say a couple of things. So I'm here today with two of my colleagues, Roxanne and Ioannis. Roxanne and I are live from Ispra, while Ioannis is live from Brussels. In this festival this year, which is the fourth edition, is taking place simultaneously in three sites, Brussels, Ispra, and online. And the focus of this year's festival is youth engagement. Therefore, we are hosting several conversations with practitioner, researchers, and policymakers on how to make this meaningful from different perspectives. If you haven't, please have a look at the program that is online, also for tomorrow, and visit our website to join the community of practice. Said that, I don't want to take time to the organizer of this session titled Why Youth Can or Cannot Change Things, addressing the problem from different perspectives. Last but not least, we are recording the session. The session's recording will be made available on our website in the following weeks. Thank you very much. And Andrea, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Anna Paula. So, hello everybody, and thank you for watching this panel. So the purpose of us getting together today is to have some discussion about young people, politics, and the role of participation and deliberation. Essentially, the idea behind this panel was to get together different perspectives that are relevant when it comes to this discussion. And therefore, I invited 4 guests that can all offer their insight. I would like to start with Martina Francesca, who is a facilitator. She works in Italy, and she was brought to the fore to give us a bit the perspective of people trying to practice a more deliberative and participatory way of doing politics. So thank you very much, Martina, for being with us. And I will give you the floor in a second, but first let me also introduce the other guests. Martin Portos, I see on the screen, and Martin is here because he can bring to the table a researcher's point of view. Martin has long been studying young people politics and is currently postdoc Marie Curie Fellow University Carlos III in Madrid. And so we are very much looking forward to learn from him what academia has to say about democratic participation, deliberation, and young people. Thank you, Martin, for joining us. Then we have on my screen, I see Hanna Bambel. And Hanna, I reached out to her because she is working with Agora, which I think is one of the most interesting experiments in participatory but mostly deliberative democracy. It's a political party and a movement that is active in Brussels, try really to pursue, to promote, to advance the cause of deliberative democracy. And I wanted to learn, I wanted her to let us learn about this topic from a more activist, a more political perspective. So thank you very much to you too, Hanna, for joining us. And last but not least, not at all, there is Sarah Högert, And thank you very much, Sarah, for joining us. So Sarah is, I would say, a special guest to this discussion, especially important because she's probably not the only young person in this conversation, but she's definitely the youngest. And Sarah has been involved with the activities, with the deliberations of Agora. And so essentially, she is a young person trying to engage in political life through very deliberative and participatory means. And so I really look forward to learn from you, Sarah, what your impression is on the topic we are discussing together. So so once again, also to you, thank you very much for being with us. Unless someone has questions, I would like to start myself asking something to our guests, and perhaps we can go in turns. We can start the way I presented you, and start our conversation with a simple but broad question. That is, what is it that young people want to attain through participation? Why do these people bother participating in political life rather than doing something else? What is the end goal? What's your sense on this? Please give us your perspectives. Martina, I will leave you the floor for first.
Thank you very much, Andrea, and thank you all for being here. So I would say that I'm really lucky to be in contact with people much younger than me that are really committed and willing to bring about social change. And probably, I don't know, probably this is an information bubble, but at the same time, it is really a privilege. And my perception is that the goal that they have, or we have, in participation is to see or to encourage and support a system change, to see the system that we are embedded in shift towards a different perspective and towards a different culture. I think that this is because young people have a deeper feeling and understanding that the society as we know it is maybe falling apart and crumbling beneath our feet because of climate change, because of the ecological crisis, because of economical crisis, social injustice, etc. And I think that this feeling of tremendous changes that we are witnessing is something that pushes for, let's say, more bold results and bold action at system level. So I don't know, I have this perception. I don't know if I can be considered young anymore, but I think this is something I share with people much younger than me, and it is something that really seems very much present. So the idea of attaining system change, bold actions, something that really shifts our worldview and perspective as society. You are on mute, Andrea.
Yeah, sorry about that. Thank you, Martina. Martin, does that resonate with what social science tells us, or you have a different image?
Well, I think this, I mean, hello everyone, in order to answer this answer, I think it will be more, let's say, enlightening to listen to what the other guests have to say in general. But the overall rationale, I think, is what tends to be the consensus in academia these days. I mean, what is being already brought up to the table by Martina, in the sense that, you know, once upon a time, there was this overly pessimistic view towards the participation in general of young people, young people involvement, let's say. They tend to be, or the view was that they tended to be portrayed as being overly disengaged. You know, they refrain for engage in politics and actually promote change, except maybe from some people more related to some specific milieus that are putting forward this sort of systemic change that Martina was talking about. But these days is that, these days I would say, dominant view is that, it's not that young people don't engage in politics, they engage in politics in different ways, as compared to other types of, let's say, more dutiful generations, which tended to engage in more formal, traditional ways of doing politics. Young people engage politics in different ways, sort of, through the development of online technologies, lifestyle politics, and so on, and so forth. So, of course, young people has been overrepresented, especially in extra-institutional participation and movements in the last decade, very visible through the anti-austerity protests and protests against the inequalities, especially in the European periphery, but also these days in climate justice protests against, let's say, racism and in solidarity with refugees and migrants or feminists.
Okay, thanks for the overview, Martin. And what about Brussels situation? How does the situation look like seen from Brussels? Why do young people participate, deliberate? What can you tell us, Hannah?
Yeah, I cannot speak for Brussels, of course. I will only share my perspective from the Agora point of view. So we organize citizens' assemblies in Brussels. And we send out invitation letters to citizens who are drawn by lots, actually addresses that are drawn by lots. And on most of the addresses, there are citizens living there. So they get an invitation letter. So I think young people react to that invitation letter out of curiosity, because they think, oh, there's someone who wants to hear my voice. So I think that's the first part. And also curious to meet other citizens, because it's an assembly of citizens where you meet citizens of all ages, backgrounds, diploma levels, genders. So especially that. And also politics, and then more specifically governmental system and parliamentary system, are the most visible decision-making system in a society. So it attracts people, but it also doesn't attract people because of different reasons, of course. Some of the reasons that Martin already said. So I think it's mainly that they are curious about deliberation as well. What does it mean, deliberation? Because so far, most young people have maybe experienced it at school, maybe in some communities that they have entered, but what does it mean, deliberation, on a more societal level? So I think that's the main factor there.
Okay, thank you for Agora's perspective, which is not the whole of Brussels, but it's a very interesting part of it, to be sure. And Sarah, how does it all sound to you? Why do you and people like you bother joining political life, doing political things, participating, deliberating? What can you tell us?
I think personally for me, can you hear me?
Yeah, very well.
I think personally for me, it's much more that I feel like the elders or the older generation have in a way almost failed us, that we now as young children or as young teenagers have to push forward into politics and to actually make change. We desire change also in the political system, as you mentioned, and because we also do not feel represented in the political system. It's mostly in parliaments or in the government, we see old men or older women. We don't see people under 30 really. So we really feel like to be heard, we need to go out to protest. We need to spread our word through social media, which is maybe to older people, they don't see us spreading our political opinions so much, but we do, because through social media, we really spread it a lot. But because the older generation is not as involved in social media, they do not get the perspective that we do, as we have in our, we can say, tight circle or inner circle. But as Hannah said about Agora, the thing that really made me interested about it was that it was not, I wasn't specifically chosen. It was that it was really randomly chosen, and I was allowed to be chosen, but not because I was young, but because I was a citizen. So it didn't matter that I was young or that I was what gender I was. It just mattered that I was a citizen of Brussels. That's what really spoke to me about the assembly.
Okay, and I find it really powerful. You pointed out to a couple of important dynamics as well as the others. So the generational failure, not to say call it conflict, it's something that is there. The curiosity is there, the hope for cultural change, and a range of issues that are actually problematic. All seems to converge to drive people towards for more participations and deliberation that hopefully can improve society. Now, okay, now I will go the way around. So, Sarah, if you don't mind, you will be the first one to start answering my second question for you. The second question would be, what are the main problems young people seem to have with participation or deliberation? So, what is it that you feel you are unable to change? Why is that? And Sarah, you can take your time if you want to think about it. I would like you to go first, but otherwise I can ask someone else.
Well, I already mentioned about how we do not feel represented in politics, which is really one of the main things, but also about how in politics, we often feel like they promise a lot of things, but actual action is never taken, which is a very big thing with the youth. We really feel like politics is, in a way, making it all rosy, but never taking actions, or too scared to take actual actions towards things because of money or because they fear that it will have a bad image upon the government or upon their country. So, and another thing is it's not available to us. We don't really have, if you're not well educated, I myself, I have the privilege to go to an international school, but other students, other youths who are not as well educated don't have the possibility to be in any way politically involved, because nobody comes out to us. We are the one who have to reach out. There is nothing that calls to us. There is no possibilities. There's no availability. So we're really restricted in a way. And unless you have some kind of background knowledge or education or even college education, we are not considered to be taken seriously, because what do we know? Many words I hear is, what do you know? You're only 16, you haven't lived a life yet. But that doesn't mean I can't watch the world. I can watch what problems there are. I can see social injustice. I can see what climate change issues there are, and I have an opinion, but many people do not see that.
Okay, well, to be sure, we take you very seriously. In fact, that's why we invited you. Unfortunately, this is not actual politics, like we are not making laws, but it's a way, hopefully, to tilt things little by little. But thank you very much, Sarah. And Hannah, you would be next if you feel like it.
Yeah, I want to give you some statistics, actually, because we mentioned that we don't see enough youth represented in the parliaments. And Brussels, for example, which is quite a progressive city, I would say, in Europe. There, I looked it up. So out of the 97 parliamentarians and governmental ministers in the current legislature that started in 2019, only 21 people are under the age of 34. I didn't count how many of those are between 30 and 34, so under 30, that's probably even less. And then the current population in Brussels has a 33% 18 to 34-year-old people. So yeah, that's not very representative, I think. And I would even argue that Parliament should have an overrepresentation of young people, because a lot of the decisions that are being made are for the future. And that's the biggest generation that's there. So it's a bit risky to say that, but I think there's definitely a say for that. And then, yeah, other problems that I see with young people, especially in the assembly, then is disappointment that a lot of decisions, a lot of laws that we try to introduce are just blocked because of partisan structures, because of old habits, because of bureaucracy, because of the general slowness of parliaments. And we see that as well with our own parliamentarians. So Agora has one deputy, which is not enough to really weigh in on a lot of things. But it is an experiment, like you say. And he was also confronted with all of these like political games, habits that crawl in. And for young people, that is way less accessible. It's also intimidating. It's scary. It's like, oh, these dinosaurs, you know, you don't have to be old to be a dinosaur, by the way. So that's something that we see a lot. Another thing that I see with young people participating is that in the assembly, most of the young people who drop out early is because not only of disappointment, but also because they made a lot of plans and they want to do a lot of things. And I think it's hard to prioritize. I think it's a very human thing, but I see it more with younger people. So yeah, that's it.
Okay. So I don't want to put it all in one basket, but it seems that representative politics, the way they are, come with a bit of a negative connotation when you ask young people. Martin, enlighten us through science.
No, they are actually bringing up really interesting stuff, discourses to the table. I very much have seen this discourse that Sarah mentioned, that all the generations have failed us. It's been resonant what I have heard and what we have studied. And I will also add, if I may, also political institutions have failed them or have failed young people. Specifically in terms of the main problems, difficulties that young people have to make their voices heard politically, I think, or at least in light of our sort of prior research, we can sort of split or break it down in 3 aspects, maybe. One of them will be, well, when you study sort of unequal patterns of political participation, one of the most widespread terms that we use in political science and political sociology is that of political opportunity structures, right? Sort of political opportunity, meaning contextual features that make, in this case, young people more or less likely to participate in politics. Actually, we find that those aspects that generate inequalities tend not to be specific of the youth. In the sense, well, there are some, so think, for instance, of the, voting turnout age of 16. So that makes a difference if you can vote at 16 or 18, for instance. But those aspects tend not to be specific about the youth or not tend to damage particularly youth, as opposed, let's say, to all the generations, but different welfare regimes do. Specifically think, housing policies particularly affect young people or people in their 20s and 30s, you know, how much they have to pay for their rents or to buy a house. There are different types of regimes that have different kinds of politics, especially the so-called conservative model, that are particularly detrimental or what we call cohort unequal for particularly damaging the youth. And especially there are little initiatives to, let's say, involve politically resourceless people or young people with lower resources, both in terms of social class, in terms of education. So generally speaking, what we do find is that, all the participatory efforts, Agora, I think from what I heard, being an exception to this or a lucky exception to this, tend to reproduce an existing inequalities that are observed for other groups of the population. A second feature, I'm going very fast, that we observe is that when you analyze public discourse sphere, something that attracts our attention as compared to other dimensions we study, for instance, climate and environmental stuff or LGTB rights, when we speak about youth, actually, the main claimants or people who bring up to the public sphere the youth discourses is not the youth itself, but actually states, public authorities. What does it mean? It means that actually young people, young organizations have very little agency. So they have only a small say about youth-related stuff in the public sphere. And the third aspect, which also already Hannah and Zara spoke about, is this aspect of, especially with the development of new technologies, it's easier than ever for young people to express themselves, to voice themselves, to have a voice, but that it doesn't mean that they will be automatically heard by policymakers and by public institutions. So whereas their voices can be heard more easily, the gap is, if not the same, still larger between what is being said and what is being done.
Okay, that's a good way to deliver 3 important points, Martina, that add very much to the conversation. Martina, I have the sense that you might touch with your hands, so to say, some of the situations, some of the grievances that have been aired so far. What's your experience? What are the problems for young people?
Yes, I wanted to add something about this disillusionment with traditional ways of participating or traditional politics. And what also Sarah and Martin were saying before, that today maybe there are different ways of participating for young people through social media, activism, etc., that are not part of our, more traditional ways of listening to some social groups, let's say. And the thing is that these new ways of participating are probably more horizontal ways of participating, more distributed, and other traditional ways of participating are probably more hierarchical. So there is a different way of communicating, of organizing, etc. And this requires also different culture, that is a culture of collaboration, of interconnection, of self-organization, distributed power, that is very different from the culture or the worldview that we have in traditional institutions. And I think that also deliberative democracy and other ways of or tools for participation go more in this direction of collaboration, interconnection, dialogue, etc. So I think that we do really need a deep shift in our culture and way of relating to each other in society. Otherwise, we are still, we will be stuck in having a concentrated power somewhere that is not trusting other social groups, and then this dynamic of not trusting each other, not having spaces for collaboration and dialogue, and but this is not the way, I think, in my opinion, given the complexity of the challenges that we have today, this is not the best way to face the challenges that we have today. I mean, when we talk about climate change or other super complex topics, we cannot really base ourselves only on the opinion or the intelligence of one part of society. We do really need to open up and to widen our perspectives. So yes, I think that the main problem is not a problem of young people, it's a problem of how as a society we are organized, the kind of culture that we have, and the need, and we have this need of shifting this culture towards more collaboration, interconnection, and a different model based on networks instead of concentrated power in certain places. And of course, this is not easy, but it is happening, I think.
And that helps me to go to the next point. Martina, you have kind of a propositive account of what we need to do, okay? So there are problems for sure, but we are unlikely to overcome them by only singling them out. We need some ways to organize ourselves and address them. And in this respect, my third question for you would be, what are the strengths then that young people specifically can count on when it comes to democratic life? So we have kind of shed a light on what are the problems that all the old stuff brings with itself. I would like you to tell me what's the good stuff that is coming with the youth. And this time there is no particular order, but probably there'll just be an awkward silence at first. But then whomever feels like it, you can jump in, and we can also try to interact as if we were together. Granted that we would be interacting, I think we would. So on the positive sides of young people, who would like to say something? And if you don't say anything, then it means they have nothing positive to add, which is not the outcome we want from this conversation, perhaps.
I can start if you want. I think young people, as they are the youngest generation, they also have like the longest time to live in theory. So they think more, I guess, about a long-term version of the future. Yeah, so I think that's a kind of fresh mindset that young people bring about. If you look at the topic of climate change, for example, young people will be most influenced by climate change than people who are 70, 50, 60, something like that, even 40. So of course they will divert their attention more to that topic and all of these other topics, because it will be a big part of their future on this earth. So I think that's an interesting perspective that they bring, and that is very directly related to your age, I think. Doesn't mean that older people don't think about this, but it's a different perspective, I think. What was also mentioned before is that young people have this bold type of action. You know, they're still less influenced by this old political habits or bipartisan or multi-partisan thinking or a typical political system. Once you enter a party, you will think for the party often, the political party, I mean. And when you're more into activism, that's different, I think. So they are less influenced by these factors. So that's also an interesting part. I think, what else did I think about that? Oh, no, that's it. Yeah.
That do look like plausible and important points. They have time on their side and they're fresh, their ways of thinking. I think that helps to conceive something better than we have. Granted that what we have has some problems, but it's also what enables us to do many of the things we do. Anybody else would like to say something positive about youth?
I can go.
Sam.
I mean, I myself as a youth, I have a lot of positive perspectives about the youth. I feel like we're very motivated, very passionate about change. We desire change and we're ready for it. But how we can obtain that, we don't know yet. And as you said, Hannah, through activism, through protesting, for doing things in real life, so we feel like that we have some kind of like we're actually doing something, we're contributing to society, we're able to make a change, which we aren't in other ways. And I also like what Hannah said about, we have a fresh perspective. We haven't lived in this society for years, and I've been almost taught in a way how to think, but we come with our own perspective, with our own minds, with our own ideas, and we try to pursue that. We try to not be influenced by everybody else. And I think that's also a big part of why everybody calls the youth rebels, when it's actually just not being in this box that's been formed around I think, older people or adults who've lived in the society, but because we haven't yet been formed, we're allowed to think outside of the box.
Yeah, okay.
If I may,
Martina, can you speak from inside the box?
I want to mention two background conditions that I think are specific, let's say, of people who are now in their early 20s, for instance. First, they are digital natives. Is the first, like, really full cohort which was grown up, with the, let's say, fully immersed in new technologies. So Andrea, me, and many others remember a world without internet, or without having internet at their homes. Probably is not the case anymore of Sarah. On the other hand, it's a generation which is growing up with a slightly different mindset in terms of social expectations. So especially in the Southern European context, they cannot take for granted, actually, quite on the opposite, that they are going to live off better than their parents. So previous generations lived with this social escalation illusion, if you like, so that they are going to make progress and they are going to live better than their parents. I think it's very embedded in the mindsets of the youngest people that might or might not be the case, that cannot take it for granted. I think they already mentioned the most important, let's say, attributes that these young people on this new cohort, especially of activists, are bringing to social movements and to fostering social change. I think the main let's say, contribution lies in terms of innovation. Innovation in terms of strategies, in terms of repertoires of social movements that tend to be, maybe they are more willing, let's say, to take risk, and this normally meets the opposition or is at odds with the, let's say, older cohorts, which are, let's say, status quo gatekeepers, that even within, actors that are fostering and actively promoting change, such as social movement milieux and organizations, there is this sort of generational conflict, or at least contrast, that maybe Sarah and other people have actually confronted in the past. And I wonder actually what they have some experiences of this sorts on their own. And another, I think, very important feature of this new cohort is that I think they tend to take, Martina summarized it very well at the beginning when she said something that we aim at system change, right? This idea that struggles are cross-sectional. It's not that we find independent, separate, compartmentalized struggles in terms of climate, in terms of racial and migrant background discrimination, in terms of feminism, or so on. Actually, different sources of grievances and discrimination feedback onto each other, and all is a part of a whole. And finally, the very last reflection that we have learned from especially political socialization literature is that the way these younger people and the first contacts with politics that take place during the teens years, let's say, actually shape you forever. So are long enduring, long lasting. The issues you care about, the ways you engage with politics, the kind of attitudes and political behavior that you have developed when you were 15, 16, 17, to some extent, are going to leave a long imprinting in the way you interact with politics over your lifespan.
Okay, that sounds very bad news for me, because I really don't like the way I grew up politically. But it took a lot of effort to undo it, and probably didn't even manage. Okay, let's go on. Martina.
Well, I think that we can undo what we learned. Otherwise, I mean, it would be very, very difficult to change as a society. So this requires, of course, effort, commitment, and also you need to be confronted with the reality of what you learned and that is not working anymore. And this, I think, is something that young people are really doing these days, this sort of truth-telling of uncomfortable truth about climate change, social injustice, you name it. So this role of pointing at the problems and the things that are not working in the current system we are in. So this system of industrial growth society, whatever you want to call it. So pointing out what is not working is something I think important to support and encourage change to another direction. And again, for me, here comes up the importance of a different culture, a culture of collaboration and dialogue, because of course there is, I mean, intergenerational conflict at the moment. Sarah was saying before, older generations have failed us. So there is something there happening. And at the same time, I personally believe that since the challenges we are facing are so huge and so complex, we do really need to confront them with in a different way, not just through conflict per se, but with using conflict as a way to evolve and change the relationships we have, the culture we have, towards more collaboration and more interconnection. Because as Martin was saying, this is systemic. This is not just one challenge in a box that we can address in, with technological or engineering tools. We solve the problem and we are happy forever after. This is something much more complex, and we do really need to face it with in a different way, with also more complex tools and more interconnection and relationships. But the truth-telling part, I think, is super, super important, and something that I really see young people doing lately.
Christina, yours seems a bit of a plea for support. Young people, please help us getting things to change. It's not as much as like a message tailored on young people as it is, and I think this is important, a call for let's get together, otherwise we're not going to fix this. But I don't want to put words in your mouth. It's just what I get out of it.
Yes, it would be something like that. I mean, we do need young people. We do need their voices. We do need to, and then maybe in the last question, probably I can share something about how to do it. And we need, I don't know, all of society to come together to face those challenges, because otherwise they're too complex and too big to be put only on young people's shoulders. I mean, it's something that it's everybody's responsibility. Maybe somebody has more responsibility than others. And we do really need to take our responsibility as individuals, but also as a collective, because otherwise we're not going to solve it.
Yeah, it makes full sense to me. And Hannah, please, of course, you can have the floor.
Yeah, I still wanted to add something to that question that you asked. So at the Citizens Assembly, we work a lot around setting a framework for collaborating, for deliberating together as citizens, that the citizens do together, which means active listening. Everybody gets the same amount of speech time, be aware of other people's languages, etc., etc. So a lot of inclusivity and things like that. And what we notice, and this is maybe a bit stereotypical, is that young people tend to understand that way more quickly than older people. And what we also see, which is very stereotypically, is that it's mostly older men who want to take the word and who want to weigh in on the debates. And every assembly, there are people like that who leave earlier because they don't feel at ease or at home, because they're not used to it or less used to it. And so with young people, we notice that if we talk about things like active listening or be aware of your privilege. For example, you have highly educated young people and then you have lowly educated young people. Be aware of that it tends to go way easier, because yeah, that's more part of their generation. It's also thanks to the internet influence, I think, and that's also something new and fresh and good that young people bring into the deliberation process.
I mean, as you know, I've been involved in the Citizen Assembly, and I definitely have noticed that a lot of older people have an issue just actively listening, not just to the youth, but to everybody else, because they're there to talk, and they're there to talk about their ideas, but they don't understand the fact that Citizen Assembly is not just about them, but about the active discussion about everybody. And I've definitely noticed people who I've become acquainted to, who are more in my age range, are more understandable, more patient when somebody may not be as good with expressing their words or thoughts, or might even try and help them, while others, more older ones, might try to stop them from talking or almost ridiculize them for not being able to express their thoughts or opinion as well.
Okay. Actually, I should say that when I attended one or two meetings from Agora when I was in Brussels, I really I was admiring of the attention that was paid to the interaction among people. For a political party or a movement, this is not always necessarily the case, to say the least. So I do believe that you are walking the talk. So I see there is a question from someone in the audience that I would like to take, but first let me ask a final question to our guests so we respect the program, and then I believe we will have time to hear from the public as well. And the last question would be, what could really help young people foster democratic change? I mean, if you could have one thing, one ingredient that is missing and would be desirable to have to bring about change, starting with young people actions, what would that be? And once again, the floor is open to anyone who wants to take it. Martin, since he's a social scientist, doesn't have an answer because things are complex. And so, I know you, but we do the same thing. So, but maybe Sarah, if you could, if there could be one thing that would really help, what would that be?
A lot of pressure, but quite honestly, I just would say allowing the youth to participate in just politics more, actively reaching out to youth. Not that, because the issue is that we have to actively reach out for political parties, or just even if you want an internship, to be the minimal amount involved in any sort of politics. So I would really, like, in a perfect world, see that the government or politics or the parliament actively reaches out to youth and does programs and does things so that the youth can participate and just be part of the political movement.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. We can take note of that. Anybody else? Martina, I see you unmuted yourself.
Yes, building on that, I think that somehow we have to turn the question upside down. So it's not simply what others should do, because this has the risk, I mean, the government or institution, because this has the risk to be patronizing and tokenistic in my perspective. So, okay, let's invite 2 young people to a participatory process, and then nothing happens. For me, there should be something deeper, that is, how can we co-design together the spaces, the processes where participation happens, so that they are welcoming and yes, welcoming also to young people who want to be there. Because otherwise, I see sometimes the risk of, okay, let's do something that is small, that doesn't really change where the power lies or how processes are managed or designed. So let's change it. Let's design them together with young people so that they are more similar to the culture. And I agree with Hannah and Sarah. I also see with young people that they already have a different kind of culture. And so, Sarah, I don't know if you agree, but
well, I think it would be great if we could like co-organize in a way, but I unfortunately do not think that is possible. I am very pessimistic about that. I see how politics is, and I see how the involvement of youth is. There's like I wouldn't say negative connotation behind it, but just it's not really seen in a positive light. It's seen, oh, okay, you can do these little jobs and these little jobs, but leave the big politics to the older people, to the people who know about things. So unfortunately, I don't think, or as long as I live, unfortunately, I don't think this might happen.
Take that.
I have two answers. One is a more realistic one and one is an activist one. My more realistic one would be youth parliaments seem to work, seem to have a say. So I would increase their power, let's say that, or their influence. What I saw in the assemblies is that if we organize separate moments with only the young people together, that they tend to stay longer and more in the assembly. So I think giving them more space to unite themselves across different backgrounds as well, not only the ones from the same school or the ones from the same diploma level or whatever. My more activist / radical say would be, proposal would be that the parliament says, okay, every 2 months we implement at least one proposal made by youth into society. And we also create a quotum for parliamentary members. For example, 1/3 or 2/5 of the parliament has to be younger than 34. It's an activist approach, I would say.
Okay, it doesn't sound too wild. Maybe Sarah will be able to remember this development, hopefully. Martin, you don't have to necessarily send something unless you really want to, no?
No,
Okay.
this time it's just, let's say.
Okay, yeah, it makes sense. I also struggle to think of one thing or two that could really help making the trick. But this kind of insight here was very valuable. Speaking of youth chambers, the other day I saw on Twitter someone tweeting about the Young People Citizen Assembly on biodiversity. It's biodiversity has got major problems, and it's possible it will get worse. And it's young people having to deal with it more than the rest. Let's get them to talk about it. So this is initiative, if I remember correctly, taking place in Ireland. And so I really didn't feel like we are on the same continent, looking at that kind of news from Italy. I felt like we are in two different planets because this kind of innovation, here it's not even being told, like conceived of, told about or conceived of. So this is for me to address our discussion a bit towards the common home that the European Union is and is supposed to be, also when it comes to democratic opportunities to all of us. The participatory and deliberative ways are taking very different roads within our union, and this is a matter for concern, to me at least, and to those who care about deliberative and participatory democracy. Hannah.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, of course, that I think the future is very much more for citizens' participation and different kinds of citizen panels and assemblies. And what you mentioned, young people's citizen assemblies, I think that's definitely also part of the future next to the existing institutions.
Yeah, but you mentioned it first, so I just took the hint from you. Yeah, I really hope to see more of that. It's a good ground for experimenting and change. Now, I asked you all the questions that I would have liked to do, and I will quickly scroll through the guests, to the people watching actively at the moment, this Yeah, Damian, we have less than 5 minutes. So if you have a question, you're very welcome to do it, but then we will have to stop soon. Can you speak? Yeah.
Yes, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yeah, very well,
Perfect.
indeed.
Okay. I would like to add a comment and a question, because Martina was speaking about the systemic changes, and the other speakers told us about the reality that we are in, where there is partisanship, where there are political parties, and there is a boundary in the communication between the people in power and the youth. And I would like to ask you about the possible ways of breaking this boundary beyond systemic change. I mean, that going with the Latin adage that, you know, words instruct, but illustrations lead, I would like to ask you about the leaders who are to imitate in terms of bringing the youth into conversation. I have one example to give, and that's how I will finish speaking then. There are youth capitals in Europe. The one is in Tirana at the moment, and the coming one is in Lublin, Poland. And I've heard a mayor of Tirana speaking that when he said to people in his secretariat who are dealing with his calendar, oh, cancel this meeting with that complaining dinosaur, let's say, and bring a class of young people to my office so they can speak to them and listen to them and talk to them. And I was wondering whether you could give some examples, not specifically names perhaps, but simply this kind of practices where this boundary is being broken in the communication between young people and the people in power. Thanks.
Thank you, Damien. We have less than 3 minutes. I can, for once, give an answer. If you ask me about inspiring examples also of leadership, I would think about the Chilean case, the recent Chilean case. Over there, youth and apical figures of the movement in Chile played a very major role in trying to bring about systemic change. I think it was not 100% success, but the leadership that got out of the movement is a good example for me. So not just deliberation, but also contestation, and major contestation could be a way to go to mess things up a bit. I don't know if others have other better answers. Then it's something for us to think about, like what role model can we find? Of course, Fridays for Future makes us all think of Greta's leadership, but when it comes to initiatives, what is there that we can copy or adapt or improve? So I think we are heading towards the end. I'm sorry, I would have loved Sarah to ask us a question, to hold us accountable for what we've been doing wrong as older generations, but I hope there will be another opportunity.
You can do it, Andrea. You're the last session.
Yeah, we have time.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So you can take a few more minutes if you want to ask these questions.
Yeah. So let's take these 5 minutes for all together. And Sarah, if you could ask something, you know, we've been living in a time when you were not there, we've been doing things and people have been doing things before us. Do you have a question that you would like to ask us, or something you would like to hear from us, since we're talking about youth politics?
I mean, since like you guys are older now, not old, but older than me. So I was wondering, when you were my age, were you also politically interested or politically involved? Because I know that, because I think you're all in fields that are politically in a certain manner. So I'm just wondering if maybe when you were younger, you had any kind of...
I have an interesting anecdote about that. When I was 16, it was the Iraq War. I'm 35 now. And I remember that we were so angry, you know, about the Iraq War. And so there was a massive protest in the city of Leuven, where I'm originally from. And so me and a bunch of other high school students, we just skipped class. So we we didn't go to school that day to be part of the protests. Some other students just abused this type of not going to school to just have sandwiches and going to a pub and stuff like that. But we were convinced. We were like, this is not right, etc., etc. So we went to protest, and the school actually did a really cool thing to kind of punish us for skipping school. They put us, they said that we had to go and watch a documentary about the Iraq war. So we had to sit in a big room and watch a movie on the screen. And so we were informed this way, which I think is a very pedagogical way, very good way to inform students. So yeah, there was a lot of anger about specifically the Iraq war, but about climate change, for example, I haven't experienced that so much as you do now.
Maybe I can add something about the climate change part, because when I was 20 or something, my experience with movement and participation in a way started because of climate change and environmental issues. But I have to say that I think that the perception was different like 10 years ago or 15 years ago, because I remember this feeling of being optimistic about the future, of seeing the transition time movement, the permaculture movement, and many other social experiments going on. And I remember feeling optimistic and wanted to involve everybody in doing things in a different way, etc. And I do really feel the difference now when the climate situation is getting worse and worse so quickly that I myself feel that difference, that there's not so much space anymore for that kind of optimism. And at the same time, we do really need that active hope. That means let's do something, let's be bold and try to really change things. So I'm the same age as Hannah, and I can perceive myself this shift. So I understand that the situation now for people who are 20 something now is very different from when I was 20 or 25 years old. So yes, I wanted to contribute with with this experience.
Christine, why don't you go first?
Okay, thank you. So to me, I was not nearly as politicized when I was 15, 16, or nearly as active, I think, as you are, but there were two events that marked, let's say, my relationship with politics, or that brought me to politics, if you like. One of them, Hannah already mentioned, is the war in Iraq, more international. I'm 33, so kind of the same cohort. And then another one was not related exactly to climate. Climate was not probably an issue back then. Was something related to environment. It was, I come from the northwest of Spain. At the time, there was this oil tanker ship that wrecked and sank, the Prestige, and it created a sort of mass protest that actually was my first ever protest, also going with same experience that Hannah had with the Iraq war. That 2 years before that, I went to this actual Prestige protest against, pollution on the oceans and oil tankers passing by freely next to the coast. And I must say, was also my first skepticism shock towards formal politics, not only because nothing changed in terms of that politics, that also, but because institutionally, many politics, let's say, are put forward to mitigate the impact of the movement, in this case, chipping in a lot of money and resources to the communities and fishermen that were more damaged, by this sort of pollution of the oceans, and then sort of seemingly the movement vanished into thin air.
Okay, then I'll have a last word. When I was your age, I grew up politically in an environment that was disengaged and reactionary. So it was somewhat tragic, but that's all I knew. Internet was not there for me, at least. So I would think the whole kind of world was a bigger version of what I was experiencing, and that was disheartening. At the same time, it pushed me towards studying. So I ended up studying democracy because what I was observing next to me just didn't make sense. So I wanted to find some reason of why the system was working the way it was, and how it could be done better or differently. Now I've come to a conclusion that I appreciate a lot of the things we have, even though I still see the need for a lot of need for change. But I didn't start where I'm at. It was very different circumstances and very narrow as compared to what you are experiencing. So I take the last 20 seconds to thank you so much once again. It was really valuable for me, not just to talk, but to see and to get together a bit. And I hope there will be another occasion in the future. Thank you so much also to the organizers, because they did a tremendous work, of which I saw just a tiny bit, but I'm very grateful for that. And I hope it's been interesting for all of you and for those who will watch or have been watching this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andrea, and to all the panelists. I think, well, to me, it was very interesting to learn from you. And, you know, in the spirit of active hope, so I'm going to quote Martina here, I would like to, well, invite you to join us tomorrow. And also, given the conversation we just had now, to tune in at 9:45. There's going to be a live web streaming of a conversation about intergenerational dialogues with the Vice President of the Commission, because prior to this festival, we did, together with the representation in Denmark, Croatia, and Slovakia, intergenerational dialogues in an attempt to not yet have another kind of polarization, youth and elders, of which I'm already part of, but to create these spaces of dialogue. Also, if some of you are interested, I'm going to post in the chat, and you're interested to know more about our work and to get in touch with us, do reach out to us. And if you just want to receive some updates, we have a newsletter that goes out every few weeks. And last but not least, I thank Andrea for organizing this session, and all of you for participating. I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. You. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.